Two Harbors, Minnesota. March 4th, 2026. Dr. Randy Beaumont curled his fingers on the lid of the storage freezer and lifted. A cool chill wafted upward. Screaming in his short-term memory was the pleading voice of the crumpled-up man before him. Permafrost was now covering the body. Glancing sideways at the oversized man standing next to him, he saw a smirk hiding under his thick beard. "We should tip it over," Beaumont said to his associate in the dimly lit basement. "Yank him out." The large tarp was crinkling under their feet. Rick Gaitan's eyes shifted from the sawzall on the workbench to a short and thin boss. "Nah, we can lift him out," he said with a low, monotone voice. Reaching inside the freezer, he grabbed the corpse by the belt with his muscular hands. The out-of-work doctor pulled a pair of surgical gloves out of his black Carhartt jacket and snapped them on. "Hold up," he said to a man almost twice his size. "You just left your fingerprints on the belt. You need to smarten up. I need you on top of your game." His black rectangular glasses magnified his dark eyes that were wide open. "I'll burn the belt," Gaitan said, receiving the gloves from his boss. After pulling them on, he re-gripped the leather. Dr. Beaumont reached underneath the dead man's armpit. "Lift," he said, grunting with an upward jerk. Another grunt, and the victim tumbled over the edge and crashed on the tarp. 1,000 tiny pieces of frost broke off and tapped on the wrinkled plastic. Both men stood silent. A man was frozen solid in the fetal position, lying on his side. He was frozen in time, the result of their direct actions. Gaitan lifted his head, and the two men shared a cold, muted look before hard labor. "You still haven't told me what this guy did to you." Gaitan's gaze was locked on the dead man on the tarp. He looked athletic size. Black hair slicked back with a few hard clumps out of place. He wore a cheap black suit, no shoes, thin black socks. "Go get the sawzall," Beaumont said stiffly. His freshly shaved face made of stone. No smile, no emotion. Low, thin eyebrows that matched his gel-parted black hair. Gaitan fetched the reciprocating saw and hurried back. As he stood there, the corner of his mouth hoisted upward. Dr. Beaumont held out his hand for the cutting machine. At Gaitan's pointed look, he said, "Yeah, I know. Normally, you would amputate. But this time, it's personal. Here you go, Doc." He handed off the cutting machine like they were carpenters on the job. "Surgeons in the operating room. There'll be plenty of work for you to do," Beaumont said with a nod to follow. "Plenty of money to be made." Squeezing the trigger of the saw produced a sharp, loud whine that proved the battery had juice. "What are you going to do with the body parts?" Gaitan's voice was slow and deep, face fully bearded and pale. Long and dark sandy blonde hair in a ponytail that rested in the hood of his duck canvas work jacket. The good doctor shifted the saw blade at Gaitan's chest. "I decide," he said slowly and deliberately, "what you need to know, and when you need to know it. It's a peace of mind. If something goes wrong, it's on me. And you don't want me pointing my finger at you. Understand?" Gaitan swallowed hard. My bad. I know you don't like questions." He let out a heavy breath. It just popped out of my head." He shoved his right hand into his jacket pocket. "One step at a time, Rick." He shook his head. "I don't pay you to ask questions." I know, Gaitan said, nodding with his fist clenched in the black void of his pocket. The self-proclaimed doctor dropped to one knee. Lowering the saw blade just above the neck of the dead man, he placed one hand on top of the front grip and let out a breath. Beaumont's olive oil skin was darkening with each passing second as he flexed every muscle in his little body. Gaitan took a few steps backward, now off the tarp, his eyes lowered to the gray, scruffy face of the victim. Some of the frost had melted away and revealed the oval, handsome countenance of a man named Blake. That's all he knew. His name and address, time of death, cause of death. Gaitan wondered, as he watched his boss squeeze the trigger of the saw, his body precise as it slowly cut into the corpse's neck. How these two men knew one another. What had Blake done to make things so personal for Dr. Randy Beaumont? The saw's high-pitched scream was muffled by frozen flesh. Pink sawdust was shooting down on the tarp. Shiny partials were glinting in the air.